When I was 14, I remember going to go see a comedy movie with my friends. 4 years later, I don't remember the movie or the joke that was being told, but I still remember the punchline. Jesus is a black lesbian. The punchline stuck with me throughout the years. The theater erupted with laughter at what seemed to be the completely ridiculous notion that Jesus was a homosexual African American woman. Since the Bible does not detail Jesus' physical appearance, his exact features are unknown, which implies that Jesus' physical description is not of importance. The continued portrayal of Jesus in our media allows individuals to interpret his appearance. Thus, this leaves multiple ways Jesus can be depicted. Depictions of Jesus have been controversial since the early stages of being portrayed in paintings, such as Leonardo da Vinci's portrait of Christ, which was criticized by the public at the time for not depicting Jesus with a halo. More recently, a comedy series titled Black Jesus in 2014 received backlash for its portrayal of Jesus as a poor black man living in Compton, California. The conservative Christian group American Family Association wrote that this portrayal was blasphemous. Despite Jesus being depicted as various ethnicities, genders, and sexualities, depending on time and location, many religions still have a strict physical portrayal of what Jesus looks like. Often he is portrayed as a young white male with Eurocentric features. I encountered this presumption of Jesus Christ so often that I've come to believe it's the default assumption about Jesus' appearance. However, this assumption is heavily associated with the westernized world where Jesus is white. While there is no government that holds any political authority to control how Jesus should be depicted, somehow Jesus has been acknowledged as a young white male with brown straight hair. Upon recognition of my own failure to recognize Jesus if he is not depicted as so, I intend to explore how Jesus is illustrated depending on geography. I hope to use my studies to find the history of Jesus' physical portrayal and if it's relevant to physically depict Jesus a certain way. By studying Jesus' appearance throughout history, I hope to determine if the way Jesus is portrayed is of any importance to the religion or to the individual who is worshiping him. First, by exploring depictions of Jesus throughout history in mediums such as paintings, drawings, or sketches, I will be able to correlate geography and time to the progression of Jesus' appearance. This is critical to answering my overall question, as it shows how events, time, geography, etc. can alter how we see Jesus. By analyzing how Jesus is portrayed in different settings, I will answer why those factors led artists to portray Jesus the way he is. Through answering what events led up to the alteration of Jesus' appearance, I may be able to answer how this influenced the social, political, and cultural world around it. I will also investigate religious literature to see if there may be any citation of how Jesus may have looked like. Both the examinations of the medium in which Jesus is presented, along with further research into sacred literature, will help answer the overall question of how do history and geography change the depictions of Jesus, and does this matter? But first, I sat down with some of you guys to discuss what Jesus may have looked like.
I think that I don't actually spend a lot of time picturing Jesus as a person, but I think it's more of like the images that I associate with Jesus. Like I remember reading a storybook when I was younger that kind of showed heaven as being like this watercolor painting of clouds and rainbows and like people just kind of interacting with each other. And so I think that's more of what I picture when I picture Jesus, but I think if I had to draw like an actual image of Jesus, it would probably be someone who's Middle Eastern, but I think I spend more time definitely just thinking of like the way that Jesus kind of is integrated into our world.
So I think of the stereotypical like white man with the long hair and about 20 years old, like mid-20s, and brown eyes and kind of like a little bit of a beard. Basically just your stereotypical like white man.
So I think that Jesus is like a white male. I think he's somewhere probably in between like 20 and 25, somewhere in that age range. Blonde hair, blue eyes.
Okay, so to me, Jesus is probably like a white male with long brown hair, and I know that realistically that's not probably what he looked like, but just because that's how I've seen him depicted, that's the first image I have in my head.
So I think I pictured Jesus that way mainly because of like experiences that I've had when I was younger. So like the storybook that my parents always read to me, and like the Bible I had when I was a kid had all of these watercolor paintings, and everything was just like happy and light and kind of airy. And so that's the tone that I associate with Jesus, as being more of like a loving figure. Which I think isn't what people always associate, but that's just kind of how we always talked about Jesus when I was younger. So I think it's definitely something within my family. And then also from viewing Jesus as a Middle Eastern person, I think that's more of like a cultural discussion that we've started having, is like the rebuttal against the idea of Jesus being like a white male that people can't identify with as easily if you're not a white male. So I think it's partly the way I was brought up when I was younger, and then also partly cultural discussion.
I think the main reason that I think of Jesus in this way is because my grandparents always had a picture of him on the wall, and that's kind of what I grew up with. I kind of went to church with my grandparents, but it was mainly just like a daycare, and they had some like pictures, but it was more like coloring book, and you could get colored in. That's kind of always how I drew him too.
And I guess that the reason that I think that he looks this way is because I grew up in an area where like everyone who went to my church also kind of looked like that, and the depictions of Jesus were really similar to that as well. So anytime that like you would hear a presentation or you'd see a picture of him in like one of the parables, he would look a lot the same way.
Okay, so I'm not a Christian, so I don't know really why I like am so set that he's a white male with long brown hair, but I feel like that's just because how I've always seen him. It's hard for me to think of anything else, but maybe like I would expect him to be more Middle Eastern looking because that's where he was from.
After studying a multitude of religious art, I have learned that throughout history, artists often relied on their cultural or religious backgrounds and the current events to depict Jesus in a relevant way. Starting with the Acts of the Apostles, Jesus is said to have manifested as a light from heaven that temporarily blinded the Apostle Paul. Earlier images of Jesus were much more varied due to Jesus tending to show ethnic characteristics similar to those of the culture in which the image was created. The oldest known depiction of Jesus, found in Syria and dated to about 235, surprised me, as I could instantly tell that it was in fact Jesus Christ. He is pictured as a young male with fair skin and brown hair, halo surrounding his head. It is impossible not to draw parallels to the conventional image of Jesus we see today. Despite variations of Jesus in other parts of the world, the traditional full beard, long hair Jesus we tend to recognize was already forming around year 300. By the 6th century, the bearded depiction of Jesus had become standard in East, but the West continued to mix bearded and unbearded depictions for several centuries. The depiction with a longish face, long straight brown hair, and fair skin shows consistency from the 6th century to the present. Of traditional Jesus was occurring. Other parts of the world maintain different depictions of Jesus. Often, Jesus reflects the racial characteristics of the surrounding culture. This can be heavily seen in an 18th century Ethiopian image of Jesus, in which Jesus has Afrocentric features, including thick afro hair and a deep skin tone. The representation of the race of Jesus has been influenced by cultural settings and can also be seen in multiple Asian illustrations. When examining the Bible, little is revealed about the appearance of Jesus. Some findings from the Bible say his hair are white like snow and his eyes are like flames of fire. and his feet look like highly polished brass from a furnace, which leads me to the conclusion that Jesus looks like Lumiere, the candle from Beauty and the Beast. But in all seriousness, logically, the Bible would not be descriptive with Jesus' appearance, or else we would have a clear understanding of what he may have looked like. The vagueness allows the artist to determine what Jesus may have looked like. Through all of this, I have realized that while Jesus could have manifested into any man, the way he looked while on this earth matters when we use to shape the perfect man. I've also realized how far back depictions of traditional Jesus have been portrayed and how non-traditional Jesus are not lost, but uncommon. It is all a matter of where you are that dictates who you'll see.